Hi, Total Recapped here. Today we will be going through the events of the 2010 fantasy adventure movie Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief, directed by Chris Columbus. Now warning, this video contains spoilers, so watch at your own risk. Now let's get right into the movie. The film opens with a sight of water rising into the shape of a massive entity that resembles a man, the deity Poseidon. When he arrives at the Empire State Building's observation deck, he runs upon his brother Zeus, the Greek god's ruler, who is dressed identically. Poseidon is asked to gaze at the sky by Zeus, who informs him that his master bolt, which grants him power over lightning, has been stolen. Zeus warns Poseidon that unless the bolt is returned by midnight on June 21st, there will be war. Percy Jackson, a young teenager, is next seen sitting quietly at the bottom of a swimming pool. When he comes out, his closest buddy Grover informs him that he had been underwater for about 7 minutes. Percy claims that being underwater helps him clear his thoughts and is one of the only locations where he can think. Percy enters the house and greets his mother Sally with a kiss. Sally's husband and Percy's stepfather, Gabe, arrives at the same time. Gabe retires to his room after consuming a beer, and Percy inquires as to why Sally continues to accompany him. Sally attempts to persuade Gabe to be nice to her and Percy in a way he doesn't understand. Now in the next scene, Percy is going with his school class to a museum to look at a gallery of ancient Greek and Roman exhibits. Mr. Brunner, the teacher, is giving a lecture in a gallery featuring Greek god statues. Mrs. Dodds quietly asks if she can speak to Percy alone, away from the other students. After entering into a nearby classroom in a harsh, grating voice, Mrs. Dodds, a hideous winged beast, demands to give her the lightning bolt that he stole. The creature swoops again and seizes Percy, lifting him high up in the air and threatening to bite his heart out unless he returns the stolen lightning bolt. Grover and Mr. Brunner burst into the room and make the creature fly off. Percy is sick with disbelief at what happened to him. After hearing that the Fury asked for the bolt from Percy, Mr. Brunner says in a very worried tone they found him, and Grover looks horrified, confusing Percy even further. Mr. Brunner tells Grover to take Percy to the camp. Before leaving, Mr. Brunner hands Percy an object, telling him it is a powerful weapon, looking like a pen, and he should guard it well. Grover tells Sally that Percy has to leave immediately. Sally then hurries out of the house with him. As they pass through a field of cows, Sally loses control of the vehicle, which flips. Percy looks on as Grover takes down his pants, displaying goat-like legs, complete with claws. Grover uses them to crash through the automobile glass, allowing everyone to exit the vehicle. Grover can walk and run very fine without his crutches. The three of them run from a big bull-like humanoid called Minotaur that is coming after them. They arrive at a stone arch surrounded by torches, and as Percy stares up at the arch, Greek lettering dances around before his eyes to form recognizable words, Camp Half-Blood. He and Grover dash through the arch, but Sally is unable to pass through as some kind of barrier repels her. She urgently tells Percy that she cannot pass through the gate because she is not like him. Percy refuses to leave without her, and just then the huge Minotaur grabs Sally from behind, and Percy watches in horror as the monster holds her and turns her into a flash of smoke and gold-colored dust. Enraged, Percy charges at the Minotaur, swinging the sword. The Minotaur dodges and hurls a punch that blasts Percy into a tree. After a tussle, he finally defeats the Minotaur and enters the camp. In the next scene, Percy awakens lying in a cot with Grover watching over him. He tells Percy that he is in the camp infirmary and has been unconscious for 3 days. Percy breaks down, realizing everything he thought a dream was actually real and that his mother is gone. Grover tries to comfort him, saying he feels responsible as it's his job to protect Percy. Grover begins to take Percy around Camp Half-Blood. He brings Percy to a field along a river where the students do most of their battle training. Percy stops and watches a beautiful young woman with long brunette hair battling several students at once and winning handily. On asking about the girl, Grover says that the girl's name is Annabeth and that she is the daughter of Athena, goddess of wisdom. Grover leads Percy to another field where he sees another amazing sight, including the lead centaur, Mr. Brunner, or as he explains, here in this world he is the legendary teacher, Chiron. He apologizes for hiding his true form, but he needed to keep an eye on Percy. As they continue through the camp, Chiron brings Percy into a house, which he says is Percy's quarters at the camp. Percy realizes that he is the son of Poseidon, god of the sea. Chiron says that this has been kept from Percy for all these years for his own safety. Chiron then explains that Sally knew all of this, and the reason she married Gabe was that his residence hid and masked the smell of Percy's blood, from anything that the gods could have sent to eliminate him. Chiron then finally tells Percy about the reference to him as the lightning thief. Zeus's lightning bolt is the most powerful weapon ever created. Chiron warns Percy in a dire tone that in 10 days, if the bolt is not returned, the resulting war between Zeus and Poseidon would force all of Olympus to choose sides, and Earth would be torn apart. Chiron plans to bring Percy to Olympus only after training him to the extent he could face the threats. In the next scene, Grover and Percy are heading to a training field. Chiron introduces Percy to all the other students and says he will need a team. Stepping forth to volunteer to take him is Luke, son of Hermes and camp leader, who takes him to his team. The two armies rush forth on command, and Luke tells Percy that he knows where the enemy flag is and to follow him. Luke urges Percy to hurry to the red flag while he holds off the rest of the sons of Ares. Percy hurries to a stream where he kneels to take a drink and notices the red flag, completely unguarded, just across the stream. But as he reaches near to the flag, one red soldier is there to meet him, Annabeth. The daughter of Athena quickly deals Percy several slash wounds and knocks him about the stream bank, seemingly toying with him. Chiron, Grover, Luke, and a number of soldiers from both teams find their way there. Suddenly, Percy hears his father's voice telling him to go to the water and it will give him power. Slowly, he crawls to the stream. Curiosity turns to surprise and then shock as the water flows up his arm and shoulder and over his whole body, healing all of his wounds. Percy climbs to his feet, surging with new power and strength, swatting aside all red soldiers that try to stop him. Quickly, the tip of his sword is at her throat, and she looks at him in amazement, while Grover and Chiron clap excitedly. In the evening, the dinner feast is interrupted by the arrival of a massive, terrible winged demon appearing through a bonfire, Hades. Hades calls Percy out and tells him that Sally is alive and well, but she is his prisoner, and he will release her only if he brings Hades the lightning bolt. After Hades vanishes, Percy wants to travel to the Underworld to negotiate Sally's release, thinking Hades will have no reason to hold her once Percy explains he didn't steal the lightning bolt and he doesn't have it. Later that night, despite Chiron's warning, Grover finds Percy preparing to leave camp to set out for the Underworld, determined to rescue his mother. Annabeth also wants to come along. The first puzzle is reaching the Underworld, and none of them knows how to get there, but Annabeth believes she knows who would. The three of them visit Luke at his quarters. As Annabeth knows that Luke's father, Hermes, is the messenger of the gods, he has traveled to the Underworld many times. She then asks if he knows anything about how to get there. Luke says that he doesn't speak to his father, but he says he broke into his father's house once and has some things that may help them. One is a pair of flying winged shoes, one of hundreds of pairs Hermes owns and uses to travel. Another is a map that will help locate 3 of the pearls of Persephone. Luke explains that Persephone is more of a prisoner of Hades than his wife, and she is miserable there. For comfort and companionship, she has many paramours and lovers. She gives them the pearls as a means of leaving the underworld unnoticed by Hades. One needs only to crush a pearl underfoot and concentrate on where to go. As a final gift, Luke asks Percy to take his favorite shield, saying it will be of help to him. Percy, Grover, and Annabeth catch a bus and make their way to Auntie M's garden emporium in search of the pearl. The three decide to split up and search the whole emporium, hoping to find it. Suddenly, Grover exclaims and tells Percy that they're in Medusas Lair and they need to find Annabeth. Annabeth is being pulled along by the hysterical middle-aged woman who realizes she is lost on the emporium grounds and is terrified they'll never get out alive. Suddenly, they stop short, Annabeth saying not to move, standing right in front of them. A turban-like cloth wrapped over her head and dark shades over her eyes is Medusa, cursed by Athena. Medusa steps back and removes her headpiece, revealing the snakes that serve as her hair, as Annabeth urges the hysterical woman not to look. The lure proves too much for the hysterical woman, who looks at Medusa's eyes and promptly turns to stone, her now stone hand still locked around Annabeth's wrist. Hearing Medusa speak, Percy calls out, trying to give Annabeth resolve to keep her eyes closed. Medusa hears Percy's voice and whirls around, realizing that the new arrival is another demigod. She heads towards the sound and eventually finds him. She then lifts Percy by the scruff of his neck. Percy jams his eyes shut as Medusa holds him close to her face and tells him that she hears he has stolen the lightning bolt. Medusa's soft and seductive whisper almost has Percy about to open his eyes when Grover and Annabeth arrive on the scene, driving the pickup truck owned by the hysterical woman and her husband. They smash through several statues, knocking Medusa down. Medusa hisses angrily and finds Percy's phone and peers curiously at it. Distracted, she doesn't hear Percy coming up behind her. Percy beheads her with a swift stroke of his sword. Then they take the head of Medusa with them to use it as a weapon. They arrive in Nashville during daytime, which is the location for the second pearl. At night, Annabeth loads a hand crossbow and darts between pillars, stealthily and quickly taking the workers out with drugged darts. After that, they figure out how to use the flying shoes. Guided by the shoes to an easy landing on the ground, they all tap fists, and Annabeth hugs Percy, telling everyone to gather up their things. But they're not out of the woods yet. The workers have recovered and formed a line in front of the exit. They address Percy by name and demand the return of the lightning bolt. One custodian coughs a puff of fire, and then all 5 of them emerge into a giant monster, the 5-headed Hydra. Percy, Annabeth, and Grover rush behind pillars as the middle head spews a cone of roaring flames. Activating his sword and shield, Percy takes to the air, and despite Annabeth's urgent warnings, he begins slicing off the heads of the Hydra. A terrible roar and the ground shaking prove the point of Annabeth's astonishment as the Hydra rises again, now with 10 heads, 2 of which spout flames. To counter them, Percy quickly grabs Medusa's head and points at them. Soon the snakeheads begin to thrash about and they eventually turn into stone. The 3 adventurers make their way to an all-night diner to eat. They examine the map and find the last pearl to be in Las Vegas, Nevada at the Lotus Hotel and Casino. At the casino, Grover figures that since the cocktail waitresses are all wearing green dresses, perhaps one of them has the pearl. They are lured and trapped by the lotus flowers, which the waitresses offered them on their arrival. But finally, just as Percy is about to eat one, he hears his father's voice, admonishing him not to. The flowers dull their senses and keep them prisoner in the casino. Percy hurries back to Annabeth, finding her dancing with several young women. He finds her and Grover to help him. The sight of security guards converging on them helps break the trance on Annabeth and Grover. Together with Percy, they must now fight their way through the guards back to the roulette table where Percy grabs the pearl. Rushing to a car on display as a prize that can be won, they use it to escape from the casino. The deadline being only a day away, they consult the map, finding the entrance to Hades is in Hollywood. Grover nods grimly, saying he can get them there in 4 hours. As they pull up before the famous Hollywood hillside sign, the radio gives a news report that the storm clouds have covered most of North America. They make their way down a subterranean tunnel with torches and lots of skulls in the earthen walls. Presently, they come to a mysterious man in a long hooded robe, standing in a canoe float in a dark river beside the platform. Grover tries to bribe the ferryman with money, but the ferryman burns them to ash in his hand. After handing him the right currency of the gold drachmas, the ferryman takes them across the legendary river Styx. Percy, Grover, and Annabeth walk into the entrance of Hades' palace. They are promptly greeted by 3 hellhounds that guard their master's domain. The hounds are called off by Persephone, who brings them to Hades. The trio is surprised to see that Hades has taken on human form as well. Hades reveals he is seeking Zeus's lightning bolt because it would allow him to overthrow his brothers and escape from the Underworld, where he was exiled by Zeus. If Zeus and Poseidon destroyed each other in a war, he would be able to take over Olympus. Percy tries to explain that he doesn't have the lightning bolt, but Hades doesn't believe him. He picks up an orb and shatters it on the ground, revealing that this was where he had been keeping Sally imprisoned. Percy rushes forth to hug Sally, grateful that she is alive and well. When he drops his shield while hugging his mother, it is revealed that inside his compartment is the missing lightning bolt. Percy, Grover, and Annabeth realize that Luke was behind the theft of the lightning bolt all along, but none of that matters to Hades. He only cares that he has what he wants. Picking up the bolt, he breaks his word to Percy and orders Persephone to feed Percy, Grover, Annabeth, and Sally to the souls. However, Persephone snatches the lightning bolt out of his hands and zaps him with it, knocking him unconscious. Quickly, she calls off the hellhounds and closes the furnace gate. Although grateful, Percy is curious as to why Persephone is helping them. She explains that Hades treats her like dirt, and all she has to look forward to while in his domain is her allotted time back on Olympus. A war of the gods would destroy all of that, leaving her alone with only Hades for company, the worst kind of company she could dread having to keep. She gives Percy the lightning bolt and tells him to take it and Sally away. But as Percy takes out the pearls, it quickly becomes evident that there is a problem. There are 3 pearls, which means one of them has to stay behind in the Underworld. There is a brief argument until Grover says that as Percy's protector, it is his duty and job to take on the burden. Persephone is delighted at this and promises to take very good care of Grover. Percy, Annabeth, and Sally use the pearls to take them to Olympus, but Percy is confused when they arrive at the observation deck of the Empire State Building. Annabeth points out the terrible storm clouds above, Zeus and Poseidon preparing for battle. Sally assures Percy that they are in the right place and shows him an entrance to a service closet that contains the secret entrance to Olympus. There's 10 more minutes until the midnight deadline, and Luke has arrived, wearing another pair of his father's flying shoes to make Percy miss that deadline. Questioned by Percy, Luke reveals that when Percy, Grover, and Annabeth came to see him about traveling to the Underworld, he saw it as a perfect opportunity to dupe Percy into the very role Hermes normally performs, messenger of the gods. Luke hid the lightning bolt in the shield and gave the shield to Percy so that Percy could unwittingly deliver the bolt to Hades. After a long tussle, Percy uses his powers to subdue Luke and arrives at the Empire State Building with the lightning bolt. Inside the hall, the deities of the Greek pantheon are engaged in a heated argument until Zeus demands silence and crosses to a time dial in the center of the Great Hall. Poseidon and Athena, despite their enmity, both make a final appeal to Zeus to avoid war. But as the time dial signals the arrival of midnight and the passing of the deadline, Zeus is about to pronounce Judgement of War. Just then, Percy and Annabeth rush into the hall bearing the lightning bolt. Zeus demands its return, and Percy does so. The bolt grows to its true size in Zeus's grasp. He says that Percy is wise to betray his father. Percy retorts that he was never working with or for Poseidon's benefit, and he reveals Luke as the true lightning thief. The gods all look around at each other, seeing how they had been played and pitted against one another. Zeus accepts Percy's explanation and declares peace. Athena also smiles at Annabeth and tells her she is very proud of her. Percy is returned to Camp Half-Blood by Sally. She also tells Percy, much to his relief, that she is finally kicking Gabe out of the home, that he has now served his role and she no longer requires him. Percy is greeted warmly upon his return to the camp, and Grover informs him that he has been promoted to Senior Guardian and has received his satyr horns. Sharon begins by chastising Percy for defying his rules and leaving camp without permission, but then adds that this is why Percy is now his favorite student. He has to trust his instincts so often. Grover amuses Percy with stories about Grover's time in the Underworld as Persephone's paramour as they travel around the training area. They find Annabeth in the same manner in which Percy first set eyes on her. As Annabeth asks for her next opponent, Percy raises his hand. They both start to fight, and the movie ends. And that was my recap of the movie. I hope you enjoyed it. Now comment on what your favorite part was, and make sure to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.